Hello there, Mandy here. Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart is not just a podcast. It's also a book, a free online grief group, and a one-on-one private coaching practice. If you are interested in learning more, visit mandykapehart.com to find out how restorative grief can help you heal heart, mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 179, titled This is Living Fully Alive with Ned Buskirk. How often do you consider your own mortality? It's not an easy subject to approach, but it's one that touches all of us, especially when we are grieving. Today's guest has made it his mission to transform this inevitable experience of life into something meaningful, artistic, and alive with emotion in safe community. So if you're at all curious about how creativity can be a bridge to facing our own death, stick around because this conversation with Ned Buskirk, the founder of nonprofit You're Going to Die, is a deep dive into the heart of what it means to express the ephemeral and find a life worth living. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. I am your host, Mandy, and today I am so honored to bring you Ned Buskirk. He is the executive director and founder of You're Going to Die, a nonprofit dedicated to bringing communities together through creativity to embrace the experiences of loss and grief and our shared mortality. And so this conversation, I anticipate, will be magical and meaningful. So, Ned, thank you so much for being here with me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We were introduced from a mutual friend. Shout out to Jared. He
Jeroho. Yeah.
saw something in both of us. I think that, and obviously you've known him much longer than I have, but I
Mm.
think it's so precious when we find people in this life that can have a shared sense of connection through something as intense as loss and grief.
Hmm.
So I just want to start us off by asking, what was it that drew you into community around death, art, conversation, and our mortality in such a beautiful way to embrace the reality of what we will face without leaning into the morbid or any of that stuff that can come along with it?
Mm. Yeah. Let me see if there's a certain kind of way in that's different than usual. And maybe your question's like giving me a chance for that because the default answer is usually my mom died in 2003 and
Yeah.
I was just 26. And in the wake of that loss, the life I was living, the work I was doing really eventually was not matching the experience of what it felt like to be alive after that loss.
Mm.
And so that trajectory that gets me all the way to you is very real. And maybe at some point in our time together, I can talk more to that. But I want to kind of focus in, I guess, on that intersection you just described, because like that doesn't come from my mom's death. And maybe the easy way to say it is that there is a way that I was in my life that felt very creatively driven, and I was in LA when my mother died, and I was kind of quote unquote pursuing acting or following that bug that I still feel, which is where are the places I can express myself creatively. The intersection of that, I'd say, especially sort of the performing inclination I have to kind of get people's attention, whether it be by getting them to laugh or maybe cry. Um, Intersecting eventually with my mother-in-law's death kind of right after that, and everything that brought up in 2012 from my mom's dying, to have been already hosting an open mic that really felt like part of my work in the world by that point, something maybe I wouldn't even have described as work, but an inclination to invite others to express themselves and making good space for that. And then suddenly realizing the intersection there, how powerful to be in a place where song is invited and poetry and storytelling, and then a really succinct or clear understanding for what I needed at that time, which is a place to name my dead, to talk about my mom's, to express my grief and have community witness me. And I just want to add something to maybe a caveat you kept in your question there, which is that maybe like the morbid isn't something that we make room for in the work I do, but in fact it really is for whatever's coming up, like whatever's dark and hard and messy, whatever deserves collapse and falling apart, that we're making containers to catch it all and healthily like community needs. Part of what I feel in response to your question is that it's feeling more clear even now, more than ever, even this year, how much it matters to have spaces to return from what's dark and hard, what breaks us and breaks our heart, and come back to community to tell the tale of it, to say the story, to share the medicine of that experience, even if it's just to offer a chance for other people to connect to us and remind one another that we're not alone.
I love how you said whatever deserves collapse has a container here, because I
Hmm.
think where we find hesitancy and resistance in grief work, and especially in such a vulnerable space that you are creating by saying, not only come share your story, but do it with that most expressive part of you that wants to sing, that wants to cry, that wants to create, that needs to express itself in the most vulnerable way possible. As artists, we know that that's hard to do on a quote unquote good day. That's hard to do when we are feeling like
Sure.
hopeful and light. We want to express this part that we can honor collapse as a part of the process, as a crucial and necessary piece
Hmm.
to expressing ourselves and not healing, not just saying like, okay, that's the step toward healing as a final destination, but hey, collapse actually can be part of the process that feels like safety and that feels like movement forward toward expressing yourself differently.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially in a culture that's so inclined to looking good. I mean, let's say, especially in the United States. Let's just
Yeah.
keep it to our context. What I grew up in, which is a lot of the look good, pull yourself up by the straps of your boots, like get going, move on. And I understand very, very deeply the pendulum swing coming out of generations where this is what was taught, and knowing my parents definitely are in that side of what it means to like go through the hard stuff and keep it private and move on and just keep
Yeah.
working to get that life, be successful, look good. And so then understanding that's fine. There's a lot of power and import to being alive in those ways, and we need so much more room, especially with others, to be held in the parts of us that are not successful or bright and confident and strong. In fact, maybe that voice, the voice of love and compassion and groundedness and curiosity and awe, can only really fully be expressed if we're making a lot of room for the other voices, right? Which is the voice of like our fears and our heartbreak and our grief and our sorrow and our anxiety and our worry. And knowing like when we really get room to express that and excavate it all, right? Even maybe to get a little bit more meaning that might inspire our life towards that part of us too that needs strengthening, which is the part that can hold that. The community teaches us that, that we can have places where we can see that part of us reflected, not just the, oh, I'm not alone in the heartbreak, but also, oh, I see what's possible when people have the strength to hold me up and lighten me and make me feel more alive and connected and offer me the experience of belonging. That feels like such a simple, important intersection that can be experienced miraculously in these spaces. Like, oh my gosh, where has this been all my life? That's how it felt for me with the first event. It's like, oh, I've been needing this, and I
Yeah.
needed it with all of you, and to have people show up and say, me too. And that's it, right? That's why I'm still here. That's why I'm talking to you, is that anybody else said, yeah, me too. Me too.
Tell me a story about that first event that
Mm.
was kind of a breakthrough for you or for someone else, something that made you realize, yeah, this communal aspect is different than what I've been told is good, right, helpful, whatever that is, that
Hmm.
helped you start saying, this is worth fighting for?
Mm, yeah. When my mother-in-law died, there was an open mic scheduled here in San Francisco. And before that, the open mic had been going for years by that point.
Mhm,
And it had been called You're Going to Die. And really, the invitation for that event was a little more focused on this evening is ours, and it's a place for what you might have to share that you haven't ever shared with community like this,
mhm,
emphasized by the fact that tomorrow is not a promise. And for sure, my mother's death like had me looking at life that way. And really, before she died, I think at a young age, I felt uh, very aware, like maybe kids often do anyway, but it didn't diminish. In fact, for sure, in the years to come, and with my mother's cancer diagnosis and eventually her death, this part of me very obviously got magnified. But that at a young age, I had a relationship to this part of life, this fact of life, fear, fascination, and so. By the time I'm doing this event, come 2009, let's say, it's really emphasized by that. This space is a place for you to take a risk because you don't necessarily have tomorrow. And that already having been ongoing for months and years up until my mother-in-law's death, the very first event was like lightning striking, and there is a moment when I'm on stage, and this is both a memory and sort of burned into my mind because it was recorded. So I've watched this moment on video online on Vimeo uh, multiple times, and it was up on our website and isn't anymore. But it is the moment when I say what the space is for.
mhm,
It's me on stage, like crying
mhm,
and saying maybe even a version of what I still would say, which is, I don't know what's going to happen. But what I do know is that I want to say my mother-in-law died, my second mom, my wife's mother, my children's grandma, to name that loss and name her and tell the story.
mhm.
And know that that's maybe like what you just said. This isn't about necessarily healing, and even like feeling more inclined than ever to like drop that language from a lot of the offerings we put out into the
Yeah.
world.
Yep.
But it's about the place to be seen
Mhm,
wholly and fully, and put it down. And maybe like the creative aspect of this work that I do in a lot of contexts is the getting the thing outside of you. Like the writing prompt lets you do that. The song gives you the chance to do that. The storytelling is that. It is a put it outside of you instead of just keeping it to yourself, which is a place where it does become very weighty, like very burdensome. And that I do believe part of what happened that evening was this moment where we all shared with tears and laughter. Because even after my mother died the very next day, that's what I experienced, right? Is like grief and weeping, and then suddenly like the best laugh ever, and
mhm,
awe, and feeling the ecstasy of being alive in the wake of the most significant loss of my life. And that these spaces kind of create that too, the room for significant catharsis, and like science proves, like what happens when you cry really well,
yeah.
something really healthy and enlivening, and
Yeah.
the chemicals that come with that kind of act. But knowing that it was a shared occurrence, us looking in the mirrors of one another, seeing ourselves, having people reflect these things that were unique to them, and uh not an option to take that away from them, to say I totally understand, but at least really, like in all the groups that I do, the cancer patient groups, the prison program, these spaces where you get to look at one another and say, I do understand. Like the first version of it that I had, which was the bereavement group I went to in LA after my mom died. It was for the loss of a parent. All those stories were different, but we really got to see each other from those deaths and that shared like experience of losing a parent. And to have a place where that meeting occurs, where you could go there and say, I actually understand what I feel more than I did before I got here. That somebody here gave me understanding for
Yeah.
myself, words that
Language.
express me in ways I couldn't put out or write or
Yeah.
say. And I think that night really was that. And I mean to say, and I've said this a lot of times, the success and the evolution and growth of our events, which is all it was in the beginning, to a nonprofit, and the attendance to all of our events over the years and our concerts and our workshops, it's more a testament than anything else. It's more a testament to the need for that, right? The need
Yeah.
for that in a culture that hasn't made enough room for most of us,
Yeah.
or at least in my experience, right?
Yeah. The idea of those groups is always so intimidating for people. And I say those groups meaning like grief share groups and situations where people are wanting to get together and talk about what they're going through or working with an expert, whatever that is. There's always so much hesitation. And I'm hearing that phrase come to mind, many hands make light work, around this idea of processing our grief story without the expectation that anyone around us is going to fix a thing. They're just here to share in the experience of mortality in a softer way, in a way that allows it to be both and, not I'm alive now and then I'll be dead someday, which can feel very stark and intimidating and overwhelming to consider. The way you've described the community around both the open mic nights and even these other events I want you to talk about too, it softens the blow of this is a grief support group that you need to go and tell your story. No, this is an opportunity to hear people express the nuances of their life, the details and the good parts and the less easy parts and you can say the good, bad, and the ugly, but I don't think any of those words really apply. The
Yeah,
the
yeah,
reality of
I'll say
all of
like
it.
the good and the hard, like
Yeah.
that's kind of usually how I'll cover it. But right, yeah, nothing
Yeah.
covers it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll often say the listening is more the medicine than anything else.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if we're doing that really well, it usually draws forth what's needed, like
Yeah.
when people feel like they're getting paid attention to,
Yeah.
especially these days,
Yeah.
what that invites out of us,
Mhm.
it's very, 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 very powerful to like remind people at an open mic or to tell people in the workshop context, right? Just as some examples,
Mhm.
part of the responsibility in the work is being more present than usual and paying attention more than ever.
Yeah.
And knowing like that listening is like an act of medicine.
It is an incredible cost that we can choose. And I say this often to people, hey, love is going to cost you something, and time is your biggest asset. Your investment of time in someone else is an act of love. That is probably
Mm.
the most generous act of love. And it doesn't mean you show up and you say, okay, I'm going to do the work while I'm here. I'm going to mow your lawn or I'm going to care for your children, clean your home. It's just the time itself. It doesn't matter how you and what you use it for, unless you're causing harm. That's a whole different conversation. But
Well, yeah, I mean, I even love that example as like it doesn't matter is maybe like important to acknowledge. I love the idea of I'm connecting to someone in our lives who's lost someone
mhm,
significant, and
mhm.
and knowing that some ways we get to show love is maybe through mowing
Yeah,
mowing a lawn or bringing a
yeah,
meal. And I know the intersection we're talking about specifically is like, what does it mean to receive someone
uh-huh,
and their story and their sharing,
yeah.
their naming of these things, their storytelling of these things, and not feel what even I'm still inclined to do, which is offer the like wise advice or even like rush into like, oh my gosh, I understand, and here's what I'll prove it to you, you know
Yeah.
rather than the like I, I'm with you, like I can do this with you. I'm just like so I it's like I this matters so much to me, and I'm like so bored how many times I've said this, so many conversations, interviews, contexts, and I don't mean to diminish it by naming that, but it's like it's not like supposed to have the listener think, oh my, what? Like I've never in my life.
Yeah.
It is something innate in us that I would say, especially in the last hundreds of years, has been diminished by
Mhm,
so many context that we live in now
mhm,
around capitalism and consumerism and seeking gratification and self-worth outside of us.
mhm.
again, all this is not like mind-blowing news to anyone listening,
Mhm.
but it's worth declaring, I think, especially in the context of this quote unquote work, right? It is to say this, we understand this is what's going on. And in fact, this might be a lot for you to do this because we're not used to it. And to even say it's okay if it's overwhelming. I mean, there's these events where I'll tell people, if you need to leave in the middle of this, like, we get it, like, do that, take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Some of these events, I know people are hearing and receiving more than they've maybe received in a year's time, or maybe even their whole life. I do really get that sense. People feeling startled and overwhelmed by the amount of vulnerability and what comes with it when people are generous and willing to be open and share wholly and fully real and raw parts of themselves that they maybe don't even name to their friends and family. And
Yeah.
that interesting intersection, right? That like
Mm.
community of strangers, like what's even maybe more possible in those contexts
Yes.
than like going to a family member's house for the holidays.
Yes. Yeah.
Which
It's
in your
all,
work, I wonder, right? I mean, Mandy, it's like you
yeah.
you do work where with coaching, especially maybe, but maybe there's other contexts you could speak to where it's like you're inviting someone in that likely you're not intimately woven with them in life. And so
Yeah.
there's something about that option that gives people space to like
Yeah.
name these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. It's true. I think what I'm considering about is how your events and the work you're doing is really redefining the social norms around loss and grief and how we hold space for each other, but even giving people permission to become experts, that when they walk into the room for
That's right.
themselves, they're the expert
That's
in their
right. Yeah, that's
experience.
right. That's great. Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I'm not a therapist. I'm not
Mm.
a psychologist. Do I have moments when I think, gosh, I really probably should have done that instead of my master's in English literature? I'm making millions from that master's program. No, I'm not. But like
Yes.
maybe I could have done a little more of like a mental health focused, and even still like life, I think I wouldn't be here with you if I hadn't have done that specific program that brought me to San Francisco, that led to me, actually literally led me to doing the open mic that turned into You're Going to Die, that turned into this nonprofit, right? So, okay, so I just needed to declare like why I'm letting go of regrets around what kind of schooling I should have actually gotten. But what I want people to get is what I want to echo what you just said, which is what I do feel very strongly about is that my willingness to keep being in this conversation has led to like a lot of work in the world. And I use that word, I don't mean to confine this as like a job. I mean it as something that matters so much to me, that has great purpose and meaning, that deepens my life. It makes it more expansive. It makes my own personal like aliveness more potent, to be in these contexts, all these different things that we're up to. And so what matters to me in those contexts is that I also represent that, right? I represent someone that doesn't have a certificate on the wall necessarily, that can say, I am like you, someone who can do this with community like we all need to be doing, like a few hundred years ago or so. And certainly, especially in certain contexts, certain communities and tribes, globally, there is the work of a community to do these things. Like I'm just thinking a lot about this specific. I'm not going to go into a storytelling right now, but I just want to say like some of the teachings, my greatest teachers remind me of those times when this work was dependent on community because a psychologist didn't exist. We're not
Yes.
like what's a therapist?
Yep.
What are you going to school for? And I'm not just diminishing or dismissing those career paths, because I think they're very important, and those people have helped me so much in my life, that they've helped me get here. But to say that someone could come to an event and get exactly what you just described, which is a reminder that they can do this, that
Hmm.
they can be an expert in offering this kind of medicine to
Yes.
community.
Yeah. I think it's crucial to actually name that because when modern psychology hit this stage, it didn't revolutionize everything that has been happening for generations upon generations. It just put a new name to something and helped us try to create a container to understand something new. It's
Sure.
why anytime I speak with someone who is licensed or a therapist or in some type of mental health facility, or excuse me, mental health helping profession, there is no one modality, there is no one theory, there is no one framework that they say, this is it, this is the pinnacle. They're all very, well, I'm going to temper that. The majority of people that I'm willing to talk to are open to the fact that they know very little, all things considered. And I think
Mm,
that willingness to unknow something, to unlearn the intensity of curriculum that we've narrowed down to say this is how to do the work is really crucial. That it's a humility in this industry that when I see it gives me hope that we can empower people who don't have access to communities
yeah,
like
maybe even
this,
that, right? The
or
privilege of, yeah.
yeah, the privilege of walking into a therapist's office and being believed, let alone given access. I think that creates more meaning in our shared humanity, that really honoring, hey, you as a person can go do the work. I love that you keep using the word the medicine of it, because that's precisely it. We feel so restored when we have a witness to our story in a way that they don't need anything from us. They're not here to sell us anything. They're not offering us anything. And I think that's the heart behind both of our work, is this opportunity to create some literacy and some awareness, but also just some compassion and some softness around the hard
Hmm.
edges of life and our stories. We don't need degrees to do that. We need a degree of our humanity to show up a little bit more clearly and genuinely, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the idea of unlearning. I like the idea of a professional in some of these roles, um, being willing to unlearn. I especially like for all of us knowing that this is an act of learning, like listening and then integrating is an act of learning. We're talking with an organization, a national organization of social workers, and it's like social workers hospice and palliative network, something like that. It's not important, but one of the conversations in that is the in the prep for that event, and it's not like much of a different event than what I've already described. Is like, where can we go and create a space as an organization in the ways we're good at it now and experienced, that's effective in making room for these social workers to talk about their own grief, like we talked about even before we clicked record. Like, what does it mean to be taking care of ourselves too when
Mhm.
we are in the work of taking care of others, and that space might require a certain conversation or kind of a certain tending to, because it's social workers. So the lead on this event, as a part of their organization, says, do you have questions about the social workers? Like, what might be needed specifically? What might they be interested in? What might connect to grief specifically for a social worker? And I said, this is at the end of our call, I said, that's great. I mean, in the 5 minutes we have, absolutely, you won't be able to answer the question I have around that. But you know what will answer that question is that we're going to get to do that with them.
Mm.
I mean, the act of being with these social workers in this event for 2, 3 hours will be the like learning what it means to do that specific kind of work. It's like being with anyone who's lost their parent. Part of what you're doing, especially if you've never lost a parent, is being willing to listen and learn and integrate that experience of being
Yes.
alive. And
Yeah.
and and that's when I go back to telling you that part of my work is a deepening and expanding into my own aliveness. It's
Mhm.
because like that's what these communities give me, right? It is like expansive. It
Yeah.
does like bring me out of myself. And also as a living human container, like I think we all can be, how we can step into spaces and create container with others. We are that. Having conversations with people or listening to people in like whatever they're at, whatever they're going through, whatever work there is, whatever grief they're dealing with, whatever heartbreak, and also the joys, worth naming, right? The gratitude that comes with these things, the beauty,
Yeah.
to make room as an individual human for that, like it increases our capacity for
Yeah.
carrying that into the world and offering it to others.
Yeah.
I believe so deeply in that.
Mm. Mm. I have a kind of a question about family on this front. We were talking a little bit earlier about how we need the community. It's not necessarily going to be, the people in our immediate life that we can show up and share these stories with. We're going into spaces where we don't know the people we're talking to, and we're gaining insight and holding space for them. I'm curious, as someone in this work, do you find how do you find it impacting your relationship with your family? How do you show up to family members who are dealing with grief and loss and who say, I love the work you do. That sounds really cool. Not for me. Sounds like you're changing the world. I'm not interested. How do you bring these same conversations about the ephemeral and about shifting and embracing our mortality and shared experiences and safe conversation to family? Because I feel like family is often the ones that have the most expectations on us and almost the least amount of permission to bring these kind of conversations to the table.
Hmm. Yeah, great question. Well, I feel, yeah, what you're acknowledging is true. Feels very true. I feel very lucky in that there's a lot of, maybe just to keep it with family, like specific family members where I have conversations like this, even my sister-in-law via text today, or my brother-in-law, where there's a real alignment with these understandings. And
Hmm.
and that I would say for sure is influenced, maybe especially by the shared losses, to
Yeah.
have my mother die right when I started dating my now wife, and to have shared that with her, and have that had that like fast forward our relationship in a way, because
Yeah.
what kind of bullshit do you have room for? Excuse
Yeah.
me. I didn't know
Good.
if we could use
You're
cuss
good.
words when we're talking. Right? It's not that bad a cuss word. And then to jump, unfortunately, to years later, almost 10 years later, when my mother-in-law died. And so then to like share that with my family and have them be the kind of people who lean in and who do the work, who want to face it, who want to talk about it. And there's just like other people who don't in my family for sure, like my dad, someone even closer, who has often said, life is for the living. This is like a resistance to me doing this work in a way that's like almost to the point of shaming me. And there's like so much behind that relationship that I won't get into right now. But that's just my dad. Just like anybody else, when I go out and do an event, who comes and shows up at the open mic and they see me up on stage, like crying and snotty about death and grief and heartbreak, and they're like, I'm going to leave at intermission because it's just not for them right then. It's maybe is too much in a culture where it's not common. And to just understand and say, I'm not, there's no need to force that here. I think you're asking a question too that intersects a little bit with like, also, how do we hold these things when our own family members maybe are going through grief or upset?
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, if it's okay to speak to that a little bit.
Please. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, the proximity of relationship, that's that contrast to being with strangers. Of course, like I have to admit, being with my own family members, we'll just keep it to the kids. I have a couple kids, 10 and 13 years old, and my wife, like that might be the hardest place for me to do this work. Like it
Yeah.
can be very difficult and uncomfortable, especially after a day of doing it for hundreds of other people, you
Hmm.
know? Um, and I think I'm at a time in my life where there's a lot of personal work that I'm up to, including getting support from community and one-on-one support, mentorship, and therapy, to see what's there at that intersection.
Hmm.
To know that maybe some of what I face in those spaces, and maybe even some of which I'm resistant to, is a chance for me to face a part of me that's still kind of broken, or that needs its own kind of medicine for me to deepen into that part of my life, because it's so easy to be like, look at all these events and this podcast, and then to go home and just be anxious and fall apart and irritable and upset, like
Yeah.
something's not in balance there. So I
Yeah.
think of the family context, that intersection with these sorts of things, as a place for me more than ever to do some more work to ground and balance and find self-care and
Yeah.
deepen the understandings of myself, like that go back to my childhood, that I'm still like working through. That's a
Yeah.
lot that I just threw at you in response to that good question. I hope it met it.
I think what I'm hearing you say is this is always going to still be a proving ground for us to say, oh, I'm not there yet. I'm still growing. I'm still learning. Even
For
with my own
sure.
family, that's how it feels in my home, my beloved family. I have to take a step back and remember I'm not the expert. I'm not the expert. I don't know all
Sure.
the
Yeah,
things.
right.
This person is
Yeah,
the expert in their story, in their grief.
that being said,
Yeah,
I'm sure you have moments when you know like some of the wisdom from all your work does
sure.
like show up. And my son just the other night was talking about a buddy of his, he's 13. He just said his friend texted him and said that a neighbor died in a bike accident, and this young man, or this boy, whatever, you're at that age, right? It's on the cusp. um, just even the power of him reaching out to my son to say like this happened, feels uncommon. But to be able to sit with my son and share, like we've put words to here, the simple thing that I've proven time and time again over the last 15 years, right? Which is, he asked me, what should I do or say? And I said, well, just be willing to be with him
Yeah,
and be the one that says like, hey, how are you feeling? Do you want to talk? And not try to fix it, not try to say it's going to be better, not try to add those words that we teach our kids sometimes, which is like they're in a better place, so like don't
right.
worry about it. Um, but just to be the person that can say I can be with you.
Yeah,
hmm So I do know that there's ways this work, like when I describe how deepening and expansive I feel the influences on me.
mm,
There is a way that I too feel I have. It's almost like has me like you've described. Like it has me facing the how. What do I have to keep learning here? Then what is it for me here? That matters so much and reflects calls back to that. This should always be that. This should never stop being a learning thing. To my
yeah,
oldest years, I hopefully live many more decades. That I'll always say I'm still learning.
yeah. Let's, I want to give you some time to talk about You're Going to Die, the nonprofit side, the events, the programs that you offer, and just celebrate what you've been able to create with your team and bring into different communities to really give people opportunity to find language for what they're carrying and to develop that inner desire to be an ongoing learner, an ongoing liver of life. Life is for the living, and that's exactly what you're doing, is teaching people how to live more fully alive, in my opinion. So
Mm,
tell us more about what the work is that you create for people and how they can support the work you're doing.
thanks, Mandy. Yeah, I guess I'll start by saying maybe more than ever after all these years of making room for grief, there is a real commitment, like I want personally, to have facing these dark, hard parts of life make me feel healthier and more joyful and more grateful and more alive. Like I would say the word replacing healing, like grief and healing with grief and gratitude,
Mm,
knowing that uh, we're actually maybe really more capable of holding that balance than we think. And that it's definitively not about like getting rid of the hard feelings or the discomfort. It's about letting those experiences be met with the joy and the gratitude. And so I just want to say that matters a lot to me. So I really appreciate, ironically or whatever, you using my dad's words to kind of acknowledge me is kind of funny, because when he said that, it really was hurtful,
yeah.
and dismissive. And so to kind of return to them in a new way as a form of acknowledgement is nice. So thank you for that.
Mm,
But yeah, the nonprofit, I'll just kind of briefly share all the things that we're up to, and it does feel like a version of celebration, and it comes with, more hard things like growth often does. But over the years, since the start of the open mic, eventually we got nonprofit status, and that was really led by a program that's still active, creating this program Songs for Life, which is where we send musicians to the dying and their bedsides to have them play music and also write songs about those humans, and to share the stories of their life and their deaths and the legacy of that. And also music is a part of everything we do, almost everything we do. And so to know that particular medicine is so important, and to know that that is what moves forward into life as little ships that get sent off from these dying community members, right? To hold them and to share their story, and to remind us, like, I feel we need more than ever, which is seeing how in the world around us we'll be held and kept alive after we're dead.
Mm-hmm.
That we'll be a part of a living conversation. That music program feels like a offering like that. I got invited into San Quentin in 2018, and that just jump into now. There's a lot I'm leaving out, but that's grown into our prison program, Alive Inside, led by Jordan Adelheid, our program director. I'm in San Quentin every week doing work with a group called the Light Keepers, suicide prevention. It's peers supporting other peers through crisis and trauma. And then we do a lot of our events there, workshops, grief and gratitude writing workshops, and open mics. And come next year, 2025, hopefully a concert series with maybe some high profile artists to like come in and collaborate with musicians and bands that are in San Quentin playing music for their community. And that prison program has led to us doing a tour at the end of the year here in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Down through California to San Diego and San Luis Obispo, offering our programming into the CDCR system throughout the state. We've been to Ohio a couple times, and we do work in prisons there, and with the Ohio Innocence Project, our work with the exoneree community, people that were incarcerated who were innocent or shouldn't have been incarcerated. We do a lot of work making space for them and their family and friends to express grief, for the legal teams, the legal aides and lawyers who supported their getting free. We do presentations and grief spaces at the Innocence Network Conference every year. And so we'll be doing that again in April of 2025. And we do a lot of work with cancer patients through UCSF here in the San Francisco Bay Area, doing a lot of workshops and bedside visits, in-person art for community adult cancer patients who are going through diagnosis and treatment, places to create and get that catharsis, and that place to put the thing outside of us, like I described earlier, and that chance to be with other community who understands. We have a podcast called You're Going to Die, the podcast, very creatively named, and do a lot of different side off works where we'll do work with elderly community at senior living facilities and youth, making space for these conversations in a way that I wish I had when I was younger. And Chelsea Coleman's our creative director. A lot of work right now going on in the funding and grant writing and donors and foundation support. We're doing a lot of work on that. So that is a thing worth naming. We're doing more than ever, and I'm proud and grateful for it all. And we need more support than ever. So that is this stretch of acknowledging and celebrating everything that we're up to. Unbelievable to think that first open mic would lead to all this. And we need money.
Yeah. Yep.
So that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks
Ned,
for asking.
there are so many incredible arms. And like you said, that it all came from an open mic night is the beauty of what it looks like to embrace who you are and to live fully alive, and to say, this is what makes me feel more connected and grounded to humanity and myself and the purpose of all of this. And so to create meaning in that, in a way that has developed into such a beautiful organization, impacting so many different lives, is just, it's an honor to host your story. And I'm so, so grateful that you were here with me today. Thank you.
Thanks, Mandy.
So
Yeah,
much.
appreciate it. It's meant a lot to get to talk about all this with you. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to episode 179 of Restorative Grief. This entire conversation underscores the importance of community while we grieve. Learning to listen more intently, express ourselves more honestly, and how to hold space for others to be seen deepens and enriches our lives in a way no other experience can. If you're feeling moved, inspired, or even a little more curious about how you can embrace the ephemeral nature of life, I hope you'll take some time to reflect on Ned's words and, of course, check out the show notes to learn how you can support You're Going to Die's mission to inspire a more connected and meaningful shared experience of being alive. If this is your first time joining us on the podcast, thank you for being here. The work we do together is not just work. It's not a job or a career. This is the meat and potatoes of being human and being alive. Reflecting on loss with someone else brings levity to the heaviest parts of our stories, and there is nothing more loving than sharing space to do just that. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave a 5-star review if you love what you heard today, and reach out if you want to learn more about restorative grief. And as always, before we go, one last thing. Please remember, the only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.